Thank you, Jerry. Now, you may be thinking, didn't Jerry read last week? And yes, he did. Polly was supposed to read this week, but Polly ended up being out of town. She just doesn't want to come because she saw how long the reading was. And she said, Jerry, you do it. No, she had an engagement. She had a prior engagement this morning, so thank you, Jerry, for filling in. Now, I've shared this many times. Most of you know that I come from Minnesota originally, and it's a land of 10,000 lakes. And there's many more than 10,000 lakes in Minnesota. And all these opportunities to swim and enjoy the lakes. There's never a lake far from you anywhere in Minnesota. And yet, did I ever learn to swim? No, never really did. Learned how to swim when I was very little, but then kind of a traumatic experience happened when I was about 6, and I went, done. Nope, not swimming anymore. So I've just been afraid of swimming. And it's kind of ironic being from Minnesota. I don't fish either, and I don't swim. So I'm actually maybe more comfortable here, I guess. So this story of walking out on the water always makes me a little nervous because I imagine myself, would I be willing to do that? Yeah, no, I would not be willing to do that. Maybe if I actually saw Jesus and knew it was Jesus, maybe I'd be willing to, but that's a hard thing for me to commit to. But Jesus walking across the water is if there's anything that almost everybody seems to know about Jesus, whether they have faith in Jesus or they've just heard about Jesus, they've heard that Jesus walked on water at some point. And there's a quote that I really love. Could you pull up that quote? It's from Margaret Thatcher. If my critics saw me walk on water, they would say it was because I couldn't swim. I think there's some truth to that because I think I see those jokes about other politicians nowadays where say, if I walked on water, the headline wouldn't be, they walked on water, the headline would be, so-and-so can't swim. All right, so Jesus walking on the water. This comes to us from the Gospel of Matthew. This is Matthew's account of Jesus walking on the water. Now, this happens directly after Jesus fed the 5,000. And so when the passage talks about dismisses the crowd he's talking about is the 5,000 people he had just fed. Then he sends the disciples across the Sea of Galilee, and he himself goes off by himself to pray. And then he prays all night there on the boat on the Sea of Galilee. Now, Karen and I actually were blessed enough to go to Israel about 4 years ago, we'll say. And one of the things I was looking forward to the most on the trip was getting into a boat and going onto the Sea of Galilee. Getting onto the Sea of Galilee where Jesus calmed the storm, where Jesus walked on water, where the disciples who were fishermen fished. It's such a central location to so much of the New Testament, so much of the gospel passages. I was really excited to see it. And there's a picture actually of me out on the Sea of Galilee that Karen took. Now, I look happy in that picture, but unfortunately the experience of being on the Sea of Galilee wasn't great. We got into the boat, beautiful boat, we got out, we started making our way out, and I noticed our tour guide, who was a great tour guide, and the captain of the boat were engaged in a big argument. And I started getting this sinking feeling. Something bad was going to happen. And the boat captain would not give the microphone to the tour guide. So our tour guide was able to get the microphone away from him, and he said a few different words, and he begrudgingly gave the boat captain the microphone back. Once the captain had the microphone back, he proceeded to start singing loudly. And song after song after song after song after song. We were there in the Sea of Galilee being blasted with this music and singing that, to be honest, it wasn't that great. And I kept going, okay, this next song has to be the last one. This next song has to be the last one. So he finally finishes, and he says two things. One, of course, his CDs are for sale, if you want to buy any. And two, we're going back to shore now. So that's me when he actually finished and stopped singing, and we went back to the dock. We were finally happy. But it was a shame we didn't really get to enjoy the Sea of Galilee. But I did have that sinking feeling that something not great was about to happen. Now, when Jesus comes to the 12 disciples out in the boat, as the wind starts picking up, it was just before dawn, and Jesus walks across the water to them. They're terribly afraid when they see him. But he says, don't be afraid, it's me. And Peter says, well, Jesus, if it is you, invite me to come out onto the water with you. So Jesus does, invites Peter to join him out on the water. And Peter gets out, steps out of the boat in the middle of this windstorm, and Peter walks across the water towards Jesus. This amazing moment. But just before he gets to Jesus, he gets distracted by all the wind and the storms around him, and he gets afraid. And as he gets afraid, he begins to sink. He gets a sinking feeling, a literal sinking feeling. And he slips beneath the waves. And as he's slipping beneath the waves, he cries out, Jesus, save me. Jesus grabs his hand, pulls him up out of the water, brings him back to the boat, and says, why did you doubt? Now, I'm not sure I love the translation of the NIV into doubt in this passage, because I do think Peter showed amazing faith when you think about it. Peter walked across the water. He didn't do anything small. He didn't step out of the boat and sink immediately. He stepped out of the boat and he walked across the water. What I think it really is more about, Jesus should have asked him, my humble opinion, and what I think Jesus probably meant to ask him, and he was really getting at, why did you fear? Fear and doubt are very closely related. Fear and doubt. Fear. He was distracted by his fear. This happens all the time, where we're distracted by our fear, especially when it comes to trying to do something great, to take a chance, to take a risk. We get distracted by our fear. We can't get past that fear. I remember Mr. Rogers, one of my heroes, he once said one of the things his mother would always tell him whenever he looked on the news and he would hear about these natural disasters or these tragedies that would happen across the world, and it would fill him with some fear. His mother would tell him, look for the helpers. If you want to see where God is in the midst of all this chaos, look for those helpers, and that's where you'll see God. Look for the people who are pitching in, looking for the people who are volunteering their time, trying to help. Concentrate on those things, and you'll fear less, and you'll hope more, and you'll see God in action. And that's always stuck with me. Now, it doesn't always work to overcome my own sense of fear over things, but I try to find where God is in the midst of it. I try to find where God is so I feel a little less afraid. And I feel that God is there. And when I don't feel that God is there, I can call out and ask God to be there. And typically, I feel God's presence. Now, in our second passage, we have another character. This is actually the first passage that Jerry read, our Old Testament passage. Instead of Peter sinking in the water, we have Joseph being lowered into a cistern or a pit. Used to contain water, but it was empty. Now, Joseph comes from an extremely dysfunctional family, and I kind of laugh a little bit when I hear people say, we need more biblical families. And I say, don't read Genesis then, because when you read Genesis, there ain't many nice biblical families. They're all really kind of unhealthy. Joseph was one of 12 boys born to Jacob. Jacob had these 12 boys with 4 different women. 2 of them were his wives, Rachel and Leah, who were sisters and who were actually cousins of Jacob. So Jacob married 2 cousins who were sisters, had children. Some of the other of the 12 boys were born to concubines as well too. But he loved Joseph best because Joseph was born to him not only in his old age, but Joseph was born from Rachel, the wife he truly loved. Now, you could argue if he truly loved Rachel, what was with the 2 concubines and Leah? I get it. But he did truly love Rachel, and he truly loved Joseph, who was born to Rachel in his old age. So Joseph is the youngest. And because he was so loved by his father, the other 11 sons hated him. Hated him, hated him, hated him. To the point that most of them wanted him dead, or at the very least gone. So they devised this plan to kill him and then hide the evidence by throwing him into a pit, beating him up, throwing him into this empty cistern, walking away, letting him die. But a couple of his brothers end up saving his life, saying, well, let's not kill him, let's just beat him up and sell him into slavery. And he ended up getting sold into slavery by these Ishmaelites who were coming and going through on their way to Egypt. This is how Joseph eventually gets to Egypt, but that's a whole other story. So you have Peter sinking beneath the waves, and now you have Joseph being lowered into an empty cistern, a pit he could not get out of, just beaten up by his very brothers. And I'm sure Joseph also had a very similar sinking feeling. This feeling, I have been betrayed by my brothers. I am going to either die or I'm going to be sold and I'm going to become a slave, and I have no idea what's going to become of me. But what is very different between these 2 passages, these 2 characters, Joseph and Peter. Joseph's life was saved by his 2 brothers who spoke up for him. If they hadn't have done that, Joseph's history would have been very different. Christian history would be very different. But what Peter did is Peter cried out for help. Cried out for help. Cried out, Jesus, save me. But unfortunately, so many of us, even though we know in our hearts and our minds, if I cry out to Jesus for help, Jesus will help me. So many of us are afraid to actually do it. We're afraid to ask for help, whether it's through prayer or whether it's through asking the church or asking a family member. So many of us are afraid of asking for help. One of my dad's best friends had a son a couple years younger than me. And so I got to know him pretty well. He was a great hockey player. And sometime just after he graduated from high school, he was in a snowmobile accident and ended up being paralyzed from the mid-chest down. Couldn't walk, had to be in a wheelchair. And his dad had to clean him and everything else. And one day his dad was changing him, and he smelled something really foul. And Brian was his name. He had developed really bad skin ulcers. But he didn't say anything. He didn't want to ask for help because he was afraid that his dad would be disappointed. He was afraid of embarrassment. He was afraid of being dependent upon his dad even more. So he didn't say anything. Unfortunately, these skin ulcers, which are no small deal, became infected and he passed away. Just because he was too afraid to ask for help. And we shake our head and we said, that's such a shame. And it is. It's an incredible shame. But I do think it's representative of a pandemic that men have. I'm isolating men. Women have this issue as well too, but it just seems with men in particular, we're afraid of asking for help. We think we should be able to do this ourselves. Asking for help is a sign of weakness, and we're not weak. I'm an alpha male. I'm not a beta male. Beta males ask for help. Alpha males don't. And that ain't true. We need to be able to ask for help and to put away that fear It is okay to ask for help. Because, let's be honest, when we cry out to Jesus to save us, we would be incredibly blessed if it's actual Jesus' literal hand that comes and grabs us and pulls us out. But what's more likely to happen? We cry out to Jesus for help, and it's the church that responds. Because we, the church now, are the hands and feet of Jesus. When people pray for help, we need to be the ones that respond. We are the ones that Jesus typically sends. But so much of that fear holds us back. We don't want to appear weak. We don't want to inconvenience anybody. So often we're afraid to say anything. And instead of crying out for help, we just sink even further. So, 2 lessons from this. 1, overcome that fear of asking for help. It is not a sign of weakness. It is anything, it's a sign of strength. It's a sign of faith. It's stepping out. Now, as Ken illustrated here, we've got some exciting things coming out. We've got some exciting steps that we have taken. And in many of these things, we are taking a risk, especially when it comes to adding a staff member and whether or not we can afford this long term. We don't know. We're confident we can, but we're willing to step out in faith that God will provide and that we will be okay, and that we're not going to let fear hold us back from taking the step we think we need to take. So lots of exciting things happening. And it wouldn't be possible unless we were willing to step out in confidence, to step out and say we're willing to take a risk, and we're not going to let fear and anxiety hold us back. There's an old church typo that you may have heard somewhere. It was from a church bulletin. Probably wasn't, but let's say it was. And it said, "Don't let anxiety kill you. Let the church help." And it's funny, but there's also some truth in it as well, too. It's such a shame that was so worded poorly, because there's so much truth in that as well, too. Don't sit back and be overcome by worry and anxiety. If there are things that you are afraid of, there are things that you are uncertain of, if you are scared of anything, reach out for help. At the very least, reach out and help through prayer. But don't be afraid to reach out to your community, especially your faith community. Don't be afraid to reach out to me. This is one of the things I'm here for. People say, "Oh, Pastor Pat's too busy." Well, okay, yes, I can be busy, but if you need help, I want to know. If you're afraid of something, I want to know. Because a lot of the other things, T-shirts, mugs, those things can go on the back burner. Those things can wait. I like doing them, but those things can wait. What I was called to do was be an assistant, be a shepherd, be someone here for you. So when you are afraid, when you need help, I am here to listen. And I hope you will be the same way as well, too. And that's the second lesson I want you to learn. Don't just be afraid of asking for help, but also if you see someone that you feel probably needs some help, that is probably scared, don't wait until they ask. Offer. Offer them. Offer them some assistance. At least ask, is there anything I can do for you? At the very least, can I just sit with you and talk with you for a while? Go out for coffee. Go out for lunch. Can I be some sort of source of strength? So take those 2 lessons for you. Don't be paralyzed by fear. Ask someone for help. Ask God for help. And when you see people that need help, that need assistance, that are struggling with their fear, don't be afraid. It might be God's response to that person's request and prayer for help, that you are the actual hand of Jesus helping them up from that sinking feeling. Amen.